I've never been the superstitious type, but I've always had a healthy respect for the darkness. When I was a kid, my grandmother used to tell me that the night was alive in ways we didn't always understand. She'd say, "Leave well enough alone, dear. There's no need to poke at shadows that might poke back." At the time, I thought it was just her way of keeping me from sneaking out after dark. But on a cold October night 2 weeks ago, with the skies threatening rain and an empty stretch of highway ahead, I learned just how right she was. I was driving alone on a back road outside of my hometown. My weekend trip to visit my parents had run longer than expected, and I was in a hurry to make it back before midnight. The night was moonless, the clouds so thick that my headlights seemed swallowed by the darkness. I remember straining my eyes, trying to make out the lines on the road, but they were nearly invisible. It was just me, the vague outline of pavement, and an eerie sense of quiet that made my pulse spike for no discernible reason. My radio offered minimal solace. I could barely tune into any station. An odd crackling static was all I got, and after a few tries, I flicked it off. The silence pressed in harder. My phone's GPS was my only guide, its dim screen perched on the dash. Every so often, it would chirp to instruct me on some upcoming turn, its voice sounding distorted, as if the night itself was interfering with the signal. At some point, I realized the GPS was glitching, showing my car icon drifting off the road, floating in the black emptiness. I chalked it up to poor service and kept driving. The first unsettling incident happened around 11. In my peripheral vision, I saw something flicker across the passenger side window, like a smudge or a face, but so brief it could have been my reflection. My heart hammered harder in my chest. I told myself it was just the interplay of the darkness and my imagination, or perhaps a reflection of a tree branch. But the harder I tried to dismiss it, the more I felt the skin on the back of my neck prickle. Anxiety fed on the secrecy of the night, as though something beyond my comprehension was skirting just outside the pale glow of my headlights. Half an hour later, I spotted a single faint light in the distance, headlights from another car, it seemed. Relief flooded me. Being alone in the dark for so long can do strange things to your head, and the sight of another traveler was a comfort. As I approached, I realized it was an old sedan, pulled over onto the shoulder. I slowed down, my instincts and basic decency prompting me to see if they needed help. But as I neared, I noticed something peculiar. The doors were all closed, the headlights were on, but there was no movement inside. No sign of a person waving for assistance, no silhouette on the driver's seat. I rolled down my window a crack, ready to call out, but the gust of cold air that funneled into my car carried a strange smell, like burnt hair and something metallic. I felt my stomach clench, an involuntary reaction to the unidentifiable stench. I decided not to stop. Something about the scene felt wrong. Instead, I hit the gas and passed the car slowly. My headlights swept across the hood, revealing deep scratches etched into the metal. It looked like something with enormous claws had raked across it. My mind flailed to find a logical explanation. Maybe an animal had done it, or maybe someone had vandalized the car. But the uniformity and depth of those gouges felt disturbingly deliberate. About 20 minutes later, my phone screen went black. It wouldn't even turn on anymore, leaving me GPS-less in the middle of nowhere. I tried to calm myself with the fact that I knew these roads well enough and that eventually, I'd hit the main highway. But the tension in my body had already ratcheted up a notch. Every few seconds, I checked my rearview mirror, half expecting to see that abandoned sedan lurking behind me. My mind conjured up scenarios of it trailing me, driven by an unseen occupant. The rational part of me kept insisting it was just a random broken-down car, but I couldn't shake the impression that I'd escaped something dangerous by refusing to stop. Then came the second chilling moment. My headlights illuminated something in the middle of the road, a person, or what looked like one, standing stock still, right on the center line. I slammed on the brakes. My car screeched to a halt, skidding a few feet until I stopped about 10 yards away. Heart hammering, I peered through the windshield. The figure didn't move. It was a woman, or at least it looked like one, in a tattered white dress that fluttered in the breeze. I blinked, trying to make sense of it. Her face was entirely in shadow, but her posture was oddly stiff. I slowly turned on my high beams for a better view. The beams cut through the darkness, revealing wild, tangled hair. Her arms hung limply at her sides, and I could see smears of dirt or blood on her dress. I couldn't be certain which. My brain screamed for me to reverse, to back away. A small part of me, though, remembered that she could be someone in need. Injured, disoriented, torn between fear and compassion, I eased my foot off the brake. Then she took a step forward, and I jolted in surprise. Her movement was unnatural, almost spasmodic, like she was learning how to walk for the first time. My instincts howled in warning, but I lowered the window a bit, just enough to shout, "Are you okay? Do you need help?" She paused, turning her head slightly toward the sound of my voice. When she spoke, it came out as a rasp I could barely decipher. "No roads a left." That's all I understood before she screamed, a high-pitched wail that reverberated through the car. A surge of panic made my limbs tingle with adrenaline. I slammed my foot on the gas. The woman lunged forward, her hands slapping the hood of my car in a blur of motion, and for a moment, her face was illuminated by the headlights. Her eyes were pitch black. The force of my acceleration flung her to the side. I heard a thump as she hit the ground. My car fishtailed slightly, but I kept going. My breath was coming in ragged gasps, my hands shaking violently on the steering wheel. The memory of her eyes, that sheer abyss, burned itself into my mind. My conscience warred with my survival instinct. Should I have stopped to check on her? But the primal terror in my chest insisted I'd done the right thing. I barreled ahead, pushing the car faster than I ever had on that twisting road. The rhythmic pounding of my heart blurred with the roar of the engine. The darkness outside felt more than a mere absence of light. It felt alive, throbbing with malevolent intent. Every flicker of shadow at the edges of my vision made me flinch. 1,000 superstitious beliefs flooded my mind, and for the first time, I found myself praying to anything that would listen. After what felt like an eternity, the road straightened out. I could see a faint glow on the horizon, town lights at last. Relief washed over me, and I fought back tears. I forced myself to slow down a bit, double-checking my mirrors. Behind me was nothing but darkness. Yet that absence felt more threatening than any pursuit. My grip remained iron-tight on the steering wheel until I finally reached the town's main road. Streetlights, convenience stores, the sudden presence of other cars, albeit few, lulled me into a cautious sense of safety. I pulled into an all-night gas station, my tires crunching on loose gravel, and parked under the buzzing fluorescent light. The station was nearly empty, just one other car at a pump. I stumbled out of my vehicle, legs trembling, and rushed inside. The attendant, a bored-looking teenager, glanced up from his phone. He must have seen my pallor because he asked if I was all right. I told him I'd nearly hit a deer, not quite sure how to explain what had actually happened. He nodded sympathetically, started telling me about a stretch of road where deer were common at night. I grabbed a coffee, hands shaking so badly, I nearly spilled it. My thoughts whirled. The abandoned sedan, the scratch marks, the horrifying woman. Every rational cell in my brain tried to recast these events in a plausible light. But no matter how I twisted it, something about the night was undeniably wrong. Eventually, I worked up the nerve to get back in my car and drive the last few miles home. I stuck to well-lit streets, resisting the temptation to glance into the back seat. Even though the night was behind me, every flicker of movement in my mirror made my heart pound. By the time I parked in my driveway, it was well past midnight. My entire body felt as if it had been wrung out like a damp cloth. I locked my car and rushed into my house, turning on every light as I went. Sleep came in fitful fragments, dreams filled with black-eyed silhouettes and screeching static. My grandmother's warnings echoed in my head, a grim chorus reminding me that sometimes the night truly is alive. And that night, I had looked upon its face, pale, desperate, and inhuman. I haven't driven that road since. A lingering unease has taken root in me, and every time darkness falls, I swear I can still see that woman's outline standing along the edge of my vision. Sometimes, I wonder if she really was just a figment of my imagination, a trick of adrenaline and shadows. But deep down, I know better. I know what I saw, and I'm terrified that one night, in some unguarded moment, the road will turn dark again and lead me back to whatever waits in the shadows, waiting, perhaps, to finish what it started.